In this video, I want to give you a quick and easy guide on how to transpose. So first of all, what is transposition? So there's sort of these three different kinds of transposing. They all are the same, but when people are talking about transposing or transposition, these are sort of the different things that they could be talking to and the different situations to which you can apply transposition. So the first one is when you have transposing instruments. So like when we're playing on the B-flat clarinet, when we play what is written as a C for the instrument, and we play a C on the instrument, the pitch that actually comes out is a concert B-flat. So if you've been in band class and you're playing scales and your teacher says, let's play the concert B-flat scale, but you actually play your C scale on the clarinet, that's because the clarinet is a transposing instrument. And the reason why concert B-flat is C is because it's a B-flat instrument. So E-flat instruments like alto saxophones, when they play concert E-flat, that's when they play C. So the way that transposing for instruments works is basically that when you're playing C, the note that's actually coming out, like as if you were playing it on a piano, is whatever the transposition of your instrument is. So for clarinet, it's B-flat. For trumpet, it's B-flat. For tenor saxophone, it's B-flat. So for all three of those instruments, when you play a C on that instrument, it actually sounds like a B-flat on the piano, and the concert pitch is a B-flat. Some instruments don't transpose, and they're C instruments like flute, oboe, bassoon, mallet percussion, piano, etc. And some instruments do other keys of transposition, like the French horn is in the key of F, the alto saxophone and baritone saxophone in the key of E-flat, etc. I won't get into too much about transposing instruments because I think it'll make sense when we go over these other two kinds of transpositions. And the big question that you might be asking is, why do we have like B-flat instruments or E-flat instruments? And the main reason is because it comes from when the instruments weren't able to play a full chromatic scale. So you'd have to have a different instrument for the key of the piece that you're playing on. The French horn was probably the most noteworthy of this, where the natural horn had all kinds of different adjustments you would make to play in different keys, so you could play all the notes of whatever the piece you were working on. Now that all the instruments are chromatic, it sort of has just carried over from that. They could probably all be in C, but it also does help a little bit with like reading the lines and making those things make sense, especially if you think about the saxophone family, where the fingerings for all of the saxophones are the same. So like G is a G on alto, soprano, tenor, baritone, all of those are the same fingering, even though not the same pitch comes out for all of those. So those are some of the practical reasons why instruments transpose, and it mostly just comes from tradition, and it's not so much important to know why, but it is really important to know how it works, and that's what I explained, where you play a C on the B-flat clarinet and a B-flat comes out. And once you understand how these other parts work, it'll be really easy to transpose for any note on the instrument. So you could say concert E-flat is F on clarinet, a G on clarinet is concert F, etc. And once I explain these, that'll become clear, and you'll be able to do that for any note that your band director may say for any concert pitch. So next up we have playing in other keys. This can be particularly relevant for like jazz groups or any time you're working with a vocal soloist. You may have a tune for a piece, whatever like the jazz standard is that you're working on, and you're used to playing it in one key, and a vocalist may come in and a different key may suit their vocal range better, so the band will actually transpose to the key that suits the range of the vocalist. So in this case, you'd be taking the song that you're used to or the music on the page, and then transposing it to a different key to play with the vocalist. This can also come up in clarinet music as well, and classical music, when maybe you're playing an opera and part of it is for C clarinet, and C clarinet isn't very popular. Not many people have C clarinets, though they do exist, but most people play the C clarinet part on the B flat instrument. So this is sort of a combination of transposing for the instrument's sake and also playing a piece in a different key. So normally when you play B flat clarinet and you see a C on the page, you play a C on the B flat clarinet and it sounds a B flat, and the composer wanted a B flat to sound. But if the composer is writing for a C instrument, then they'll write a C on the page and they want a C to sound. But if you're playing that on B flat clarinet, then you actually have to play a D to get the C to sound out. And we'll go over how to figure out what exactly the notes are for all of this, but I just want to give a little bit of overview of why we use this and where we use it and what it's useful for before I talk about how to actually figure these things out. And the final, most practical, especially if you are an owner of the Next Generation Clarinet Method book, is this Transposing Exercises part. So this is where we take maybe a scale, say it's even just a 2-octave major scale, and we have it written on the page in the key of C, but we want to do it in other keys so we can practice the fingerings and the notes for other keys, so we transpose it to those other keys so we can practice it in the different keys. So that's just a brief overview of what transposing is and when we want to use it. Now let's talk about how to actually do it. So what we're doing for any of the types of transposition is we're looking at a note on the page, but a different sounding note is coming out. So say we have this C down here, and this is our C that we're looking at. This is the C that's written on the page, but we're playing it on B flat clarinet. Then that means that a B flat is what's actually going to be sounding. So if you're playing on a concert pitched instrument or with a piano or a tuner that's in concert pitch, when you play this written C on the clarinet and you play a C on the clarinet, you'll actually be hearing a B flat. This works for all the different kinds of instruments as well. So say you were playing French horn, you would actually be hearing this F coming out. If you were playing alto saxophone, you would be hearing this E flat coming out. So for all three of those instruments, you could take a French horn, an alto saxophone, and a B flat clarinet and have them play this note, the note that looks like this on the page, and you'd actually hear these 3 different pitches because those 3 instruments are in a different key. The way this works is that it is always the C, the written C, sounds whatever the key of the instrument is. So B flat clarinet sounds a B flat. French horn, F horn, sounds an F. E flat alto saxophone sounds an E flat. So from there, you can apply this to different notes. So say we had some A up here. You can look at the pattern. The distance between this note to this note is a whole step. So B flat clarinet always sounds a whole step lower. So a whole step lower than A means the B flat clarinet sounding a G. The French horn in F always sounds a 5th lower. So a 5th lower than A means that we are sounding this D. The E flat alto saxophone always sounds a major 6th lower, or I like to think of it as the minor 3rd, but instead of going up to the minor 3rd, we go down to the minor 3rd, which in this case would be C. And the other cool trick to remember with transposing instruments is that the written pitch almost always is above the sounding pitch. So with B flat clarinet, we play this A, but it sounds the G lower. French horn, we play this A, but it sounds the D lower. The only exception to this is actually E flat clarinet, where when it plays this C, it sounds the E flat above it. And there's a couple other exceptions to that, because that has to do with octave transposition, where you're playing a much higher instrument, so it does transpose down to the E flat because it's an E flat, but then it sounds an octave higher because it's a high instrument. Same thing with tenor saxophone, actually. It plays this C, but instead of sounding this B flat, it sounds the B flat an octave lower. Just like bass clarinet is the same too. A B flat bass clarinet reads this C, and instead of sounding just one whole step lower like B flat clarinet, it sounds a whole step plus an octave lower. So always, almost always, the written pitch is above the sounding pitch unless there's octave transpositions happening. For the most part, you only have to worry about the transposing of the instrument in the case of somebody saying to play this concert pitch, or if you're trying to play the same note as a different transposing instrument, or if you're playing a transposing instrument and trying to play the same pitch as a concert pitch instrument, you have to know how those relationships work. But for the most part, you don't think about too much and you don't really use it practically in your day-to-day playing, other than just being like, okay, we're playing a concert E flat scale, okay, so that's my F scale that I'll play. Now, with the rule of the written pitch being above the sounding pitch, we can use that to go from concert pitches to the transposing instrument pitch. So, for example, say your band director says to play a concert B-flat scale, you can figure out what note you're supposed to start on. And I'm sure you probably already know that the note is C because you've played a concert B-flat scale and you just have heard that and memorized it, but this is the reason why. So remember that the clarinet written pitch is one whole step above the sounding pitch. So when your band director says play a concert B-flat scale, that means that they want everybody in the group to be sounding a B-flat. So in order for the clarinet to sound a B-flat, you actually have to play a C because it's a B-flat instrument, so the written C sounds the B-flat. The more practical use of transposition is transposing exercises or playing songs in different keys. And actually, in both of those cases, the way it works is exactly the same. So let's look at how to transpose an exercise or a piece by taking just a really simple couple notes and then practicing transposing them. So we're going to take just a really basic melody here, and we're going to practice moving it around to different keys. So we have E, D, B, and then C. So say we want to take these notes and play it in a key that's a whole step higher. So first of all, we need to figure out what key we're in, and then what key we're going to, and what it means to play a whole step higher. So first of all, the key that we're in doesn't have a key signature, so there's no sharps or flats. So that means that we're probably in C major or A minor. If you want to, in the future, I'm going to make a video explaining the circle of fifths and explaining key signatures and how that works. So if that's out now, there'll probably be a little link up there for you to watch that. If you're unsure about why there being no sharps or flats in the key signature means we're in C major or A minor. But just trust me, we're in the key of C major or A minor, and I would argue that this is C major because we end on C. So we're in the key of C major, and we want to take it up a whole step, so that's going to take us to the key of D major. So the way that we do that is we can look at each of these notes, and then we go up a whole step. So a whole step, of course, is 2 half steps, which is like 2 notes in the chromatic scale. So we can't just go, okay, this is an E, so the next note up is F, right? Because E to F is actually just a half step. E and F and B and C are a little tricky. If you think about a piano keyboard, there's no black keys in between B and C, and there's no black key in between E and F. So those are actually just half steps. And when you play your chromatic scale, you go straight from E to F and straight from B to C. There's no B sharp, and B sharp is actually just the same as C. So you have to go up 2 notes of the chromatic scale to make it up a whole step. So from E, we go E, F, F sharp would be our new note. D goes up 2 half steps, D, D sharp, E is the new note. B goes up 2 half steps, so it's B, C, C sharp, C sharp. And then C goes up 2 half steps, C, C sharp to D. So our first original melody was E, D, B, C. Now with everything up a whole step to the key of D, we have F sharp, E, C sharp, and D. And if you know what the key signature is for D major already, then you know that in D major we have the key signature of F sharp, and C sharp. So that's why the F sharp and C sharp are there in D major, because when you take these notes and move them to that key, we have to add the sharps in order for it to sound like the same notes. And actually I shouldn't say sound like the same notes, it's in order for it to sound like the same melody, because of course it's different notes because they're all a whole step higher. So I want to take a moment to look a little bit more closely about why it ends up sounding like the same melody, even though there's sharps in one and not sharps in the other. So let's take our natural one, the E, D, B, C. So this is in the key of C major. Then our key of D major, we got F sharp, then E, then C sharp, then D. So when you look at these notes and you look at the distance between them, you'll find that the distance between each of these notes is actually the same because of the sharps. If the sharps weren't there, it wouldn't be the same distance, but since they are, it is. So let's look at the number of half steps between each note. So E to D, we have E, E flat, D. So that's 2 half steps. D to B, we have D, D flat, C, B. So that's 3 half steps. And then we have B to C, which is just 1 half step. So this is the number of half steps between each of these notes, and this is what makes the melody sound like the melody. So when we go to the new key and move everything up a whole step, we have to make sure that this number of intervals stays the same. So F sharp to E is 2, E to C sharp is 3, and C sharp to D is 1. So because we added the sharps, the interval pattern matches. The number of half steps between each note is the same. If we didn't add these sharps in and we had F natural to E would just be 1, E to C natural would be 4, and then C to D would end up being 2. So that would be a different interval pattern and it would sound like a different melody at that point. Now, once you get into slightly more complicated music, or if you're trying to transpose in real time, it's really hard to calculate the distance between the notes, or to take each note and be like, okay, I'm on an E, but I want to play a whole step higher, so it's E, F, F sharp. Okay, the next note's a D, and I want to play a whole step higher, so it's D, D sharp, E. That's really a bit time consuming and not really smooth, so I want to teach you a little bit of a trick to make it go more fluently and be easier. So here we have our C major scale, and this is where practicing your scales, knowing your circle of fifths, and being really confident with the different scales comes in handy, because instead of looking at this in terms of the pattern of intervals and then trying to play this in a different key and retain the same pattern of intervals and make sure that we're moving each note up a whole step and not only a half step or not 1.5 steps, but exactly 1 whole step for each note. Instead of going through that way and sort of doing the note by note painstaking process, what we can do is actually just transpose this to a different scale. So we have, this is just the normal C major scale written out in a normal order. So we can take this and play it in a different key and play a different major scale in its normal major scale order. So the way we do that is the slow way. Just to explain it, we would go up a whole step for each. Say we're again going to the key of D major. So we would take that up a whole step to D, up a whole step to E, up a whole step to F sharp, up to G, up to A, up to B, up to C sharp, because it's B is B, C, C sharp is a whole step, and then up to D. And we end up with our D major scale. So here's our new D major scale that we've taken the C major scale and transposed it up a whole step. If you've ever played your D major scale before, you're probably familiar with this, and that familiarity with the notes of the different major scales and the different scales is what's going to help us to transpose more quickly other more difficult and complicated pieces of music or exercises that we might be working on and needing to transpose. So say we had a more complicated musical or scale pattern passage like this one, and if we were to take that and do the slow method of going note by note and thinking through the intervals and making sure that we're going up a whole step exactly for each of them, that would be quite cumbersome, where we'd take the C up a whole step to D, D up a whole step to E, back to C, which is up a whole step to D, D again, up a whole step to E. And you can see as you're going through that there's sort of a pattern, like every C goes up to D. So this C goes up to D, both of these Ds go up to E. This D, when it comes back again, still goes up to E. So we can, instead of going note by note and going everything up a whole step, we can just learn what these notes, what the C will be a D every time, the E will be an F sharp every time if we're going to the key of D. And again, this may seem okay for now, but say that you're transposing to a different key, like say the key of A, which would be up a sixth. That's thinking, okay, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. Okay, I've gone up 9 whole half steps to get from C to A. Doing that for every single note becomes very cumbersome. So this other method makes it a lot easier, and what we're doing is we're basically looking at this pattern and sort of analyzing it and figuring out what scale degrees it's using, and then figuring out how to use a different scale and use the same scale degrees but different notes from a different scale. So you may be asking, what is a scale degree? So scale degrees come from a number system that we can use for any scale, particularly the major scale. So we have our C major scale here, so we can give it scale degree numbers. So C is 1, D is 2, and this little like caret over the top is sort of the universal symbol for scale degree. E is 3, F is 4, G 5, and so on up the scale until we get to the octave. You can call it 8, or you can just call it 1 again, because after all it is a C again. So all Cs are scale degree 1, even if it's an octave higher. Now we have this number system, and at our D major scale, it's exactly the same scale degrees. So scale degree 1 isn't always C. Scale degree 1 is whatever the bottom note or the first note of your scale is. And this is how we're going to be able to use the pattern system to take this exercise and transpose it to any key that we want. Because instead of analyzing the intervals and the distance between every single note, we can analyze the pattern of the scale degrees. So let's look at this. We have C, which is 1, and then we have D, which is 2, and then back to C, which is 1, and then D, 2, up to E now, which is 3, then back down to 2, then up to E again, then up to F, which is 4, but then back down to E, which is 3, and then back up to F again. So we can start to see what this pattern actually is, and this will allow us to take it to any key. So instead of having to think, okay, I'm going to play in the key of F, so that's up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 half steps, and doing every single note up 5 half steps, then I'm actually going to be thinking of just this scale pattern, but in the key of F. So this pattern of the scale degrees, but in a new key. The most simple way of putting this is that we're taking whatever piece we want to transpose or whatever exercise we want to transpose, and we're simplifying it down to its scale degrees, and then we can put in whatever scale we want and play the scale degrees of whatever scale we want in that order, and we'll get this piece or this exercise in the different keys. You can see we have the pattern of 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, and we can take that and put it on whatever notes we want as long as we know our major scales. So in C, it's C, D, E, D, E, F, E, F, but in the key of D, we take the same scale degree pattern, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, D, E, F sharp, E, F sharp, G, and we can go on to any other key as long as we know the key signature. So say for example, we want to do it in the key of A. Do you know what the key signature of A major is? If not, you can check out the Circle of Fifths video that I'll make eventually, so make sure that you're subscribed to the channel so that you know when that video comes out. And if it's already out, you'll see it up, recommended in the description and up in the little info card thing. So the key signature for A major is F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. And it starts on A because it's A major. So we can take the same pattern, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, but do it in A major and it becomes A, B, C sharp, B, C sharp, D, C sharp, D. And you can do that for any key. By knowing the scale degree pattern for whatever you're working on allows you to move to any key that you want as long as you know your key signatures and what the major scales are. So I hope that helped you to understand how transposition works and some of the reasons why it might be useful and why we might do it. I do believe that if you are able to look at a scale pattern and then play it in all 12 of the major scales, then it really enforces the understanding of your major scales. It's better for you than just reading the notes in all the different keys. Some method books write out all of the keys, but I think if you actually do this transposition yourself, it really forces you to know how the scales work, what the key signatures for every single scale are, and work through them really effectively. But of course, that's going to take some practice, and it's okay to feel a little uncomfortable with this at first. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Transposition is definitely a tricky subject, but remember, things are only difficult when you're unfamiliar with them. So if you go practice, take the most simple patterns, even just like a 1 octave major scale, and practice transposing that to the different keys. So you're gonna figure out what key you want to go to. So say we're going C to D, then that means you're going to start on D and you're going to apply the key signature for D major and then play through the scale. And you can do that with all of your different scale patterns that you like to do. Scales in thirds, which is a scale degree pattern of 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5, 4, 6. You can apply that to any key by putting those different key signatures and the different notes in for those scale degrees. So go try it out, go practice it a bit, leave any questions you have in the comments, rewatch any of parts of the video that you need. And if you really do this on a few different scale patterns through all of the 12 keys, you're going to be so comfortable with your major scales. And if you ever come across a piece where it's maybe a C clarinet part and you're playing it on your B flat clarinet, or an A clarinet part that you're playing on your B flat clarinet, you're going to feel comfortable transposing that music. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in another video.